So again, we finished last time with the whole idea of what does it mean to have Kabbalah soul, to take on the yoke. And he said here that it means that it's not enough just to accept the mitzvahs. You have to do the opposite from what the heart wants. Hefech mima she'alev chomeh.
But we're putting the heart down all the time. We're always putting the heart down. We're saying that the only thing that's important is the moch.
No.
But the heart has a lot of positive.
Of course. Chassidus doesn't put the heart down. Chassidus understands that the animal nature, the animalistic nature of man is in what we call the heart. The innate state of it is in the heart. And that innate state has to be refined. So the heart is actually in a certain sense, the heart is the opening, like we saw, it's called Reuta de Liba, or the will inside the heart, is the opening to any kind of divine experience. It's the opening to any kind of lasting connection with Hashem. But to get to that, you have to remove the orla of the lev. You have to remove the, how would you say orla? The
covering.
I guess.
Precipice. There's a word, I can't remember exactly.
It's like the covering over the male organ. Mm-hmm. That this orla is something that separates you from being able to truly have Hashem in your heart. And that needs to be worked on. But the point is that the only thing that can work on that is the mind. But once the mind is refined to any extent, the heart, then on the contrary, the heart is the seat of the connection with Hashem. That's why it says, "V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha." You shall love Hashem with all of your heart.
So the brain now transforms the heart.
Right. So the brain is what shifts the heart. But really, the point is, in the end, to get to the heart. The point is to get to the emotional bond with Hashem, which is called love and awe. And those are heartfelt emotions. They're not mindful emotions. Of course, they also exist in the mind. You can also understand these topics, but the point is you have to feel it. So he says that really to receive the yoke of heaven, you have to go against what the heart. You would just have to add here the word initially wants. The initial want, the will of the heart. That's what we've learned many maimarim, many essays about it ratzon ve'it ratzon. That the Zohar says there is will and there is will. And the Alter Rebbe explains there's the will, the lower will, which is a product of what the mind wants. And we're not even talking the negative will there. He's just talking about the fact that if you want something, if you understand something, you'll want it. And that is the refinement of the heart. Because initially what the heart wanted was completely different. So the first level of refinement, he says, is the will that says that whatever my mind understands, that's what I want to attain. That's the first level of will. But then, after the heart is refined in that way, then you come to the higher will. The higher will, he says, that's called the avarabah. That's called the major love, the higher love. And the higher love means that I don't have to teach my heart what to want. It knows by itself. Why? Because this is a gift from above. It's a gift from heaven. Okay, so that's all of Chassidus in a nutshell. So here he's just fleshing it out. And he's saying, what does it mean to have sur merah? So it's nadarim, what people used to use. They'd say, I'm making a neder, I'm taking a vow, and my vow is to resolve not to touch so-and-so, not to do so-and-so. And that neder, that vow, was used in order to strengthen the commitment to refrain from doing something. But we don't do that anymore.
But you have a problem with that anyway, because we all know that Lady Yisrael of Berdishev, or Zusha, or whoever it was, spent the whole night saying Kushma Lamita and saying sorry for all the things he did. And then he said, I'm not going to do it anymore. And then he said, I said that last night. But
this time I really mean it.
So we know from that if Zusha says, that I didn't manage. So people don't always manage to do what they promise. Now you've got two problems. One is you're doing the thing that you said you're not going to do. And you've also made a vow, the vatola, so you did double one.
So we talked about that yesterday. That was the reason why, over the generations, first in the Middle Ages, they stopped making nedarim altogether, They considered it to be something negative. And eventually, sometime in the 15th, 16th century, it became forbidden to even say the word. So now whenever you do something, you say you're going to do something, you have to say bli neder. And that's what he's going to address in a moment. But that's an interesting development in Yiddishkeit. It's very surprising, but it's a very psychological development, because just like what you said, right now, when you don't follow through with your vow, it weakens your word. You begin to doubt yourself. You begin to not believe yourself. So Zusha here is not making a vow and you didn't keep it. He's saying,
he didn't say he was. He said, but you can see that even Reb Zusha, who promised to do something in his words, according to him, he didn't do it. Probably did, but that's beside the point.
But here we see that you're not weakened. Meaning you have to gauge what it's doing to people. Does it weaken people? There's a whole question now, if you might say that this is the reason why people don't say this every night, but I don't think so. I say it every night, and I don't feel that it weakens me. I don't feel that I have less resolve the next day, because I already said that, the night before and the night before and the night before, and I never kept it. First of all, because it's not true. Simply not true. Over time, I've been able to change certain things. So it didn't take a year, didn't take 2 years, but it took 10 years. And when I look back and I say, after 10 years, I'm a different person in certain respects. In those respects that I kept saying to Hashem, both I resolve to change this and I beg you to help me, because I'm not, for the last 9 years I haven't had any success. So I don't know if the change was caused by the many times that I asked for it, or was it caused because, I hear that there are people by whom these things never change. So maybe I do have some, I've had some help and it's worked. Or maybe it is resolved. I don't know which it is. It's very hard for me to tell. So first of all, I think that, at least from my personal experience, these things, they don't weaken you. They don't weaken your resolve, because it doesn't have the formality of a vow. And because it doesn't have the formality of a vow, I'm not breaking my word. What I am doing is I'm proving that I'm not yet ready to change. I'm not yet in control of what I'd like to be in control of. But over time, I've learned that it does come. It does happen. That's the first thing. The second thing, which I think is really coming up with Rosh Hashanah. People on Rosh Hashanah, a lot of people feel that the whole thing is one big show. Why? Because last year I also stood here on Rosh Hashanah, and I said to you, Hashem, I'll be like this, be like this, be like that. Okay. And it took like 2 weeks, and after Sukkot I forgot. And I was a regular person that I always was. And I didn't change this year at all. So I've been doing this ritual for, 30, 40, 50 years. And it's never changed anything. So why would I want to come back to shul again on Rosh Hashanah and make all these resolutions? So, because I'm from, because I honor tradition, and it's kind of strange on Rosh Hashanah not to go to shul, so I go. But my heart is not with me. I think that's an experience that a lot of people have, and it's a very difficult experience, and it's a very difficult experience to have. I think it's very, very disheartening that you can't enjoy the power of Rosh Hashanah. So there's a question to answer this question. This is really coming up, so I think it's worth discussing. Why do we read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah about Yishmael and Hagar, and them being cast out from Abraham's house, and she ending up going to the desert, and the wilderness, whatever it is, and there's no water, and he's about to die, and she goes away and cries and begs Hashem to save him. The whole thing is a very strange story, because Ishmael was
35.
Yeah, I don't know. As a young adult, at least it was, if not an adult. So he was the one. So clearly, he wasn't about to die physically, but doesn't matter. The Torah describes it that way. He was probably going to die, but she was claiming that he was going to die because he's now out of Abraham's protective spiritual teachings. Right? She knows what his real nature is, and without Abraham, she knows this man is going to be, suicide bomber. That's what he's going to become.
Big trouble.
He's going to be trouble for himself and for everybody around him. So she realizes that. She's not stupid. She gets it. And I think that's what she's bemoaning, really. But the Torah is, the Torah is the Torah. So the Torah doesn't say these things directly. It gives you like a mashal. It gives you some kind of story about it. And then it says, "Vayishma Elokim et kol hanal." God heard, not her. You heard him. Apparently, he was also praying. He also understood from his mother's reaction that there was something that was now wrong with his life. Maybe it wasn't clear exactly what that thing was, but he realized something was wrong, and so he also cries out to Hashem, and Hashem hears him. And I imagine what he cried out. What did he say? Look, I understand from my mother, she's really concerned about what type of person I'm going to become without Abraham, without my father guiding me, keeping me in check. And he said, look, Hashem, I want to become a good person. Is that realistic with his nature, without Avram in the picture? Is that realistic at all? Growing up in the... No, it's not realistic. It's nonsense. He's going to turn out to be the wild man he was. But Hashem hears his voice. So the Chachamim say, why do we read this on Rosh Hashanah? Because we're in the same position. Hashem knows we're not going to keep what we resolve to do. He knows what the situation is. He's not blind. But Hashem listens to Vayishma Elokim et kol hanal ba'asher hu sham, where he is at that moment.
Yeah, what's going on now?
And that's what's important. You don't run the world. You can't make the circumstances. But you do run this moment. You don't run the future. You can't make a commitment to the future. It makes no sense if you would. You're a liar. If you think you're either an idiot, or you're a liar, or you're some of both, or you're narcissistic, or I don't know what you are. Nonsense. You don't know. By the way, which is a huge problem with politicians. But let's not get into that, right? Anybody who believes a politician's promise is as stupid as he is foolish. I don't know. Okay? There's no such thing. It doesn't mean anything because it's a platform. Like I said, it doesn't matter. The policies are policies that have nothing to do with what they sell you. So really, that's such an important thing when you're coming to change, is to understand that change is not I would say, pouring concrete into the future, like making the future like this and not like that. That's not change. Change doesn't happen in the future. Change happens at this moment. And you have to add many, many moments in which you've committed to change for the change to actually happen. So the real question is always, how many times have you regretted, and how many times have you committed and resolved to not go back to this place where you understand is bad? How many times? The fool does it once or twice and he gives up. And he says, it didn't work. I'm doomed forever to be this way. And part of faith means that that's not how it works. That you have to have faith. If Hashem said do tshuva, do tshuva. And if you have to do tshuva 1,000,000 times, do it 1,000,000 times. Every single time after you do the sin, come and say to Hashem, I wish I didn't have to do this again. I don't want to do this again. I don't want to be in this place anymore. Don't give up on that. And it's not true. I've seen that when you are persistent and you're not impressed by your failures, eventually things move. Do they move quickly, slowly? I can't tell. I don't know.
There's a very interesting letter that I read from the Rebbe, which talked about someone who wanted to do tshuva. So the Rebbe said, if you can't put a penny in the tzedakah box and stand in front of the Aron Kodesh, and with all your heart and soul and might, you ask Hashem to help you change, you will succeed in changing. doesn't talk about failures. It doesn't talk about nothing. It just says you will succeed.
You will. Can't tell you when, but you will.
It doesn't discuss the when or the way. It just says you will.
Mm-hmm. Because change is possible. It's just that people give up. They give up too soon. And why do they give up? Because not giving up is part of faith.
Yeah, but the problem is, in the Pasuk, Al Tashlichenu Ve'ezikna. Why is that in the Yugim Midas?
Because that's exactly what Midas. It's in the when we open the Aron.
Yeah, Yugim, what's it called?
No, it's not Yugim. It's just in the.
In
the pasuk and
in the Slichos.
yeah.
What's in the
pasuk?
Slichos? Because you're saying to Hashem, right? Al Tashlichenu Ve'ezikna. Don't say to me, yeah, you're sorry for what you did, but now you're so old you couldn't do it anyway. So don't discard me just because I got old. It's not because I just got old, it's because I really want to do tshuva. Right. It's easier when you get older to say, I don't want to do that Avera anymore because it doesn't attract you.
And there's a reason why in Chassidus and Kabbalah, tshuva is related to Bina. And Bina is the sense that there is a world to come. Meaning, it's the sense that we're not finished. It's not over. There's always the next day. There's always the world to come. Alma de'ate, the world that is coming, really. It's not the world to come.
The world to come, you can't do tshuva.
Because it's not talking about that world to come. It's talking about the fact that every day that you wake up, it's the world that came. It's the world that was coming yesterday, and here it is. And you have another chance today. And you have to keep that in mind when you do tshuva. Tomorrow is another day. Okay. So, נדרים סייג לפרישות מביא לידי קדושה ובחינת אהבה רבה בכל לבביך. ופעמים נאמר נקיות מביאה לידי פרישות. והיינו שקודם החורבן השיגו בחינת נדר, אבל כיום אנו אומרים בלי נדר. So he says, this is a very deep topic. I wish we had time for it. Somebody who's learning Chassidus now a little bit more. Actually, sorry, he started learning Ramchal a little bit more. And so he said he never connected to Mesilas Yeshar. Which I understand, I never connected to it either. Why? Because... right, exactly. So he said your answer. Well, my answer was different. Because it's Musar, it's a Musar book. It's learned as a Musar book. But it's not a Musar book. It was never written as a Musar book. The Ramchal wrote it as his primer on reaching levels of holiness. It's not about Musar. It wasn't like fix yourself. It was a goal. Because it's built on the Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair Braita. Right? The זהירות מביאה לידי זריזות, זריזות מביאה לידי נקיות, נקיות מביאה לידי פרישות, and so on, this whole thing. This whole succession of midas, of character traits. So this person asked, the Ramchal was about 50 years before the Baal Shem Tov, 60 years. How come Chassidus never mentions the Ramchal?
Yeah, it does mention something.
It doesn't mention.
Talks about it. It does mention the Sefer.
I don't remember anyway. Tanya. There's maybe one or two mentions somewhere. But in principle, there's no mention anywhere. Nobody mentions him. In the first 3 generations of Chassidus, I don't think he's mentioned in any of the books. Mm-hmm. Why? So I wrote to him, it's very simple, because they all were by the Magid. And the Magid from time to time would walk into the base medrash, holding, I guess, either Dat Vunot or Klach, whatever from the Ramchal. And not because of a disrespect, but because he wanted to explain that this is going beyond the Ramchal. And so he would close the book in front of everybody, a little dramatically, they say. And he would say, and now the Yitron Ha'or Min HaChoshech. The, how do you say Yitron? The what?
The advantage of light.
Right, the advantage of light over darkness. He didn't mean to say that the Ramchal was darkness or anything. What he meant to say, the Ramchal's whole shita is based not on the psyche, but on history. His whole interpretation of Kabbalah is that everything that's in the Zohar and so on and so forth, the best way to understand it is to understand that these are the ways in which God has been running the world since He created it. So it's really a historical development. And today, the biggest, I think, scholar of Ramchal is a man whose name is Rabbi Mordechai Shriki. He's a very, very nice man. Very learned in Ramchal. I mean, really knows Zohar very well. He teaches every day. You can see him on YouTube. And you see that this is exactly how he teaches.
Moroccan.
He's Moroccan. And so, he's French, actually. You wouldn't know that he's Moroccan, except for that he speaks French. And he teaches. I listen to him once in a while, like suddenly, because I follow him on Facebook. Sometimes his shirim come up. So, or on YouTube, I don't remember whichever it is. And you still see it. He teaches it. It's beautiful. It's exactly he learns the entire Torah from a historical point of view. Historical doesn't necessarily mean, and I don't mean that he contends with archaeology or anything like that. He's not in that direction, but he teaches it as developments, as a story. That you need to understand that at each stage of the story, Hashem used a different sphera to run things, or a different revelation to run things. And everything is like that. Everything is these hanagot, it's called by the Ramchal. So he has, Hashem has hanagat chesed, hanagat din. That's more, I mean, that's not that you can't read something like that in Chazal. The sages never discuss things that way. They don't read the Torah as a history. They don't read it as different revelations of Hashem. That's a very modern reading. Right? Ramchal is affected by Viko. He's affected by, again, when Rav Kook, he was very much into Ramchal. So when he tried to build the whole system, his whole system, and he used it to explain Zionism and the return to Eretz Yisrael and this and that, so he built it all on Ramchal and his influences. Because the Ramchal and his influences, who are, again, Giambattista Vico is a big deal. He was one of the Giambattista. And his brother, and these are all people who had a very strong intuition about history. And that's how they saw things. They saw things as developing historically. So, the Ramchal never went into the psyche. And when he did venture in, once or twice, it's a novelty. And it's beautiful when he does, but it's not really his direction. And Nedarim, and about Nikius Mevial Lidei Prishus, he says something amazing. And if you would trace back through, which is what I like to do, like researching books and trying to find where's the first time something was mentioned. So probably the first mention of the subconscious is in this passage in the Ramchal. I think it's chapter 8 or 9 in the regular Mesilas Yeshar. And there he's talking about that David said, Erchatz benikayon kapai v'asovavava mizbachacha Hashem. I will cleanse my hands, and then I will encircle your altar, Hashem. We talked about this, no? We talked about this verse. It's an amazing thing. He says, David says, the amount to which a person feels connected to Hashem depends on the cleanliness of his actions. That's Nikiut. Mevial Lidei Prishut. Nikiut means you have to have. It's amazing that the Alter Rebbe that they don't write this in the Hara, but that's what the Alter Rebbe means. He says it's true that the Ramchal has an insight that there's a subconscious or an unconscious part to our psyche, but he didn't develop it. But here, exactly in this statement, Kiyut Mevial Lidei Prishut, he brings this pasuk. Ramchal brings this pasuk, and he says, David realizes that if your conscience is not clean, you can't be close to God. You can't be close. So now, here's where we fall. We have to end with this, because I also have to leave. But we have to end, because this is so important. This is the difference between Yiddishkeit and Christianity. Because we live in the Western world, we've been convinced, I'm certain of this, we have it in our minds, whether we like it or not, that sin is a permanent state. We find it very difficult to accept the fact that the moment that you said, Baruch Atah Hashem,
That's it, finished.
Soleach,
Finito
Hashem Salach.
It's a bracha levatala.
And if you don't believe that, it's a bracha levatala. We find it hard to believe that. Why? Because we're so affected by this incredibly incorrect approach, which lacks man. The point of this approach is to control you. Whereas the true approach is that the cleanliness of consciousness is possible. How? By admitting your guilt. That's it. Like David did. What did David do when Nathan came to him and confronted him about Bathsheba? He lifts up his hands and he says, Chatati l'Hashem. And it's over, it's finished. And you see that it's finished. He doesn't carry it with him. Chazal say he did tshuva his whole life. I said, it's a very big sin. There's many things he still has to rectify. He has to clean. There's a lot of things inside that he has to rectify. He has to change. Change takes time. But Hashem is not holding him guilty anymore. That's his thing.
That's painting the fence. Don't you get up?
Right. And that the Ramchal identified, and he said, look, David's ability to say, I have complete confidence in Hashem, that's what he means, he explains it there. My bitachon in Hashem, complete confidence. So confident and say, Hashem, I'll do everything, don't get involved.
Let's be friends.
That comes from his ability to completely clean the slate, completely wipe the slate clean.
The biscuit was a